Nowadays, we're used to watching Britain's women rowers winning medals at the Olympics, but it wasn't always that way. Their current success owes a lot to the pioneering work of Penny Chuter. Back in the 1950s and 60s, she dominated the sport, winning countless titles despite the sexism she faced. She went on to become a coach of the British team. Penny grew up on the banks of the River Thames, as her friend, the Olympic rower Lynn Clark, told me.
Her dad was a really keen sailor and he bought a place on the riverfront at Laleham. And I believe she was sleeping in her dinghy at the end of the garden at 4 and rowing across the Thames to primary school rather than walk.
It was quicker for me to row across the Thames to school every day rather than walk about 5 miles across farmyards. So that's how I sort of started rowing.
Where and how did she first start competing? Which part of the sport?
Punting first, and then I think she went to skiffing, and then she went to rowing. And I think she won everything she ever entered. There's a picture of her somewhere, just with so much silverware. I'm surprised that somebody didn't find out and steal it all, because it was absolutely massive.
Of course, when she first started, rowing was not an Olympic sport, was it?
It took 70 years for women to be allowed to row, and even then it was decided they could only row half the distance. And Penny, when she got to the stage that she was good enough to go to the Olympics, wasn't allowed to go.
I beat the British champion in the Thames fixed seat skiff. My coach said, well, you've beaten her in a fixed seat skiff. If you can beat her in a Shell sliding seat single, you'll go to the Rome Olympics. Little did my club coach know there were no women in the Olympics in 1960.
She was second in the European Rowing Championships, the only British woman ever to do that. But that was the end of the line for her. She couldn't do any more than that. There was nothing more than that.
She became a PE teacher, didn't she, for a time, before she was then involved in coaching the British women?
Yes, she got a job as a national coach. She was a qualified PE teacher and done all her rowing coaching awards. And in 1973, the Rowing Association made the brave step of putting a woman in a place of authority.
And was that surprising? Because was the sport seen as quite sexist in those days?
Yes, this is what was written about Penny as the coach and me as an athlete. What an absurdity, the appointment of a full-time female rowing coach by the ARA as a reward for the performances of Miss Penny Chuter. Neither rowing nor boats would exist but for men, and for the ARA to make it their business to encourage women from their main bodily functions, which is that of bearing children or nursing them, to take up male activities is to waste money and social resources on perversity.
Did she bring a new professionalism, a system to the coaching of the women's rowing team?
She adjusted boats that weren't adjustable because they weren't right for your body. She wrote manuals on how to adjust it and had a great big spanner and a crowbar to make sure things were moved so they fitted your body.
Because they were built for men?
Yes. Penny was meticulously changing things. She rewrote the training manuals. She went up to all the clubs all over the country, showed them how to coach, and educated people whilst she was doing it.
And did she have great success as coach of the women's team?
Not really. We were a keen lot, but there wasn't that history. We weren't allowed to join men's rowing clubs, and so there was very little for us. We had all sorts of hardships, not just training. So when we got against the East Germans in a second-hand men's boat, it was very difficult.
But she went on to become coach of the men's team. Was that seen as an act of betrayal?
I was pretty cross, and people who know rowing will know how cross I was. But it was my idea. My husband's boat wasn't going very well, and I suggested to him that he took my coach. And she transformed his crew that wasn't going very well, got him a silver medal in New Zealand. And it was the first time I think a woman had ever coached a man to a world medal.
And I believe she thought that the women's team would prosper more if it had a man coaching it who would get access to the resources.
Yes, she did. She realised that she was holding people back being a woman. And it must have been dreadful for her to know that you were better than lots and lots of people, men, and yet still be held back.
What do you think was her greatest success in the sport?
It depends how you look at it. You could look at the fact that she's created from nothing a world champion in Beryl Crockford and I've stood on her shoulders, and Catherine Granger has stood on mine, and now the women in their own right are every bit as good as the men.
And you think Penny has something to do with the foundations of all that?
Oh my goodness, yes. None of us, Catherine Granger included, would be in the situation that we're in now without Penny.
Lynn Clark on Penny Chuter OBE, who's died aged 82.